when it comes to cost, you guys are going to have your own pet passions, right? My pet passion is intelligent lights. But one of the things that you're going to have to understand is you're going to have to understand the demographic of your community and spend money on what it is that's going to make you effective. My community is in their 30s, a lot of young kids, and this is what we said. If we have to sacrifice a little bit on our sound system or whatever it takes, now for us, you're talking blasphemy at that point. But we said we need to make children's ministry a priority, because even though it's not necessarily in the forefront of my own mind, it's in the forefront of my demographics mind, and that's got to matter to me. So we raised a ton of support in the beginning because we thought we need to reach these people and we need to do whatever it takes.
The other thing you go through, and you go through this regardless of if you launch large or not, but I think it's just multiplied when you launch large, and that is rapid change. There are things that are changing so fast, and you maybe meet in the first preview and have way more than you think you're going to have, and you need to buy more chairs, you need to do this. The nice thing is you have 3 more weeks to get it done before the next preview than if you're going every week. The thing about going every week, Mark, it comes with high regularity. And so once you go, people are in such a hurry to get to that every week service. You got that for the rest of your ministry there. Take your time, plan it out, and do these once a month that we're going to get into. The other thing, advanced preparation, you got to do that in the timeline we're going to get to. Right. But then the criticism. Yeah. We're talking, you didn't get much criticism. Why do you think you didn't? I got a ton of criticism.
Yeah, I mean, I heard that church planners get a lot of criticism. And so one of the things that I tried to do to preempt that is I would go up in front of my own launch team and I would say, hey guys, most likely you guys aren't going to be around in 2 years. So, and you guys are my scaffolding people.
That's encouraging.
So thank you very much.
You actually told them that?
I told them that. But this is why I told them. Guys, if you don't want to leave, let me teach you the dynamic of why these scaffolding people leave. And that's because as you all know me, you're all my best friend right now, you all know my cell phone number and everything like that. And you have a lot of power and say in this church. As this church grows bigger, there are a lot of people who get upset that there's not as much accessibility and you don't have as much say as you used to. If you're okay with that, then stay. If you're not okay with that, you might as well leave right now because, you may not end up sticking around. So what I tried to do is I tried to preempt almost all of those concerns as much as I could. I knew that I would get a lot of criticism from some of the surrounding pastors. So before we even launched, I bought lunch for every pastor in that area. Man, I thanked them for their time. I tried to pick their brain as to what the community was like. I tried to befriend them so that when I eventually did end up getting criticism, which I did, it was fewer and further between because I was a known commodity. I was a friend. I was somebody that they knew and not just some pastor who was watering down the gospel so he could pump up his numbers.
And usually the criticism, it doesn't come from within. And it doesn't come from or within your church. It doesn't come without in the community, your target unchurched people. It comes from other churches. Yeah. Primarily other pastors who become jealous of what you're doing. They've been in that community a long time, and you come in and in 6 months you're running whatever, and there's a jealousy there. The staff sometimes of the church, all of that is part of the territory. If you can't handle that, it may not be, launching large may not be for you. It just comes with it. You deal with it gracefully. You love them despite their criticism. All right, let's get into, let's move on.
About this. Working the W's.
We're going to get into probably my favorite part.
Yeah.
I know you like it too.
This is the part that I learned from Dave, and this is really the strategy.
Yeah, we're going to get into preview services. I want you to tell your story in one sec. But preview services, let me tell you the history in a minute or less. Preview services started right around 1995. In my opinion, it's one of the best innovations in church planning, certainly in the last 20 years, maybe in the last 50 years. Came out of this guy named Dave Olson, who's with the Covenant Church, and it was practiced, it was implemented at Bayside Covenant Church, which is in Sacramento. I came 2 years later, started in Auburn. good friend of mine, Ray Johnson, was the pastor. They had this idea, what if we did a monthly service and just gathered people and reached as many unchurched people as we can. So they started it, they did it at a country club in Granite Bay. Now, Granite Bay is kind of the Beverly Hills of Sacramento. It's not near what Beverly Hills is, but to Sacramento, you get the picture. And so they started it there, and they set up chairs for 40 people. 40. They did a direct mail out. They had people invite friends. They had a core group of about 20. 160 people showed up. They're like, it blew their mind. They think we're on to this. They didn't even know if they'd continue it. They thought, well, let's do it again. So they did it again the next month. The next month, more people showed up. They met in a room that sat like 180. They had to have overflow with a little TV in a side room. They did it for 6 months, once a month services. At the end of 6 months, they had their launch, and they ended up launching with over 350 people for their launch. That is the origin, and that was beginning of the preview services. And now churches around the country, churches around the world are doing it. Typically, it's a monthly service. It doesn't have to be. Some of them will do 6 previews in 4 months, and some of them will be monthly, some of them will be every other week. Preview, we call it that, like a sneak preview to a movie theater. You know, they're going to get in. The church hasn't really started yet. These are preparatory meetings for the launch, and then we go week to week. We didn't call them preview services to the general public. That was our in-house term. We would call them monthly services or, whatever. The worst thing you want to do is call them practice services. Yeah. They're not practice services, are they, Mark?
No, because, you're going to preach a real sermon. Real people are going to get saved. You're not going to say, okay, why don't you practice raising your hand so that at the grand opening you can really accept Christ.
And we're taking a real offering, right?
And we are
taking
real
money.
You are giving real money.
Yeah, and no, it's funny, but so many guys, they mistake, previews, I can do those because we're not ready to launch yet, so I can just do these and kind of practice, kind of let my hair down service kind of thing. And no. Previews, you want to hit on all 4 cylinders. You're going for it. You maybe don't have everything yet, but you've got enough to show great quality and really do a great job. And people come and they're like, there's a wow factor. I was at Mark's. We experienced the same thing at a couple of them I did. Where at the end of the service, it was just electric. The power blew. That did happen. Those things happen. But aren't you glad that happened there and not awesome at the launch?
Yeah. Right.
But at the end of the service, unsolicited, people just clapped. They just clapped. And not like I was doing, not a golf clap. They just really clapped. And it was just kind of saying, this was great. And then there was like, we got to wait a whole nother month to see, to be part of this again. But it was that idea of the preview worked. And it's like, wow, if they did this, if they had 250 or 220 people and they had this kind of excitement and Mark preached the word in this great worship at this, what's it going to be like? They haven't even started yet. What's it going to be like when they launch?
Yeah, just to piggyback off of that, you want to put your best foot forward. You want to be able to think that you're 100% done when you start your first preview service, because here's the deal. When you think you're 100% done, you're actually only 80% done. And you won't even realize that until you get to like 5 minutes before the service. So you got to put your best foot forward, and you have to explode onto the scene. I've been on 2 different church plants, and part of my launching large philosophy came as a reaction against another church plant that I was a part of that I really wanted nothing to do with church plants after that. Because, they just kind of did their thing. We were lackadaisical, and we never ever really kind of gathered any steam. There was never ever any deliberateness. But with this, when I came upon the launching large strategy, it just resonated with me because I thought, okay, I'm not just going to ooze onto the scene. If 200 really is the hardest growth barrier to break, period, then guess what? We're going to break it on our first service, and we're never going to look back. So that was our philosophy.
So tell them, just kind of give them an idea, overall timeline. We'll talk about seasons, so don't get into that. But just talk about, like in a minute or less, your experience with the previews. How many did you do? How did the numbers play out? How did the momentum play out?
You want me to talk about week 2, 3, 4, 2, or do you want me to just talk about the previews?
No, I just want to talk about the previews.
Okay. Before we started our first preview service, like we said, we wanted to really just kind of explode onto the scene and not just have a practice service leading up to our real service, the grand opening. So what we did was we did a 5-week campaign of kindness getting out to the community. I'm going to talk about that a little bit more tomorrow. Servant evangelism, we did that. We sent out a direct mailer for our first. We told our own launch team, you guys got to be praying for people. I told them to write names on cards. I pinned those cards all over my house. We were all praying for all of these people. We had about 220 come to our first preview service. After we did 5 preview services leading up to our grand opening. Now that's a long time not to go before your grand opening, but you got to resist that urge. Nobody ever wants something as much as they say they want something. People were telling me, we want a youth ministry, we want a youth ministry, we want a youth ministry. By the time we launched it, all the people who said they wanted it weren't there. So we had 5 preview services. We had 220 at our first. We kind of bumped down after our first one because the first of anything for us is always kind of artificially inflated because Aunt Sally is there and Joe Bob is there and my grandma's there.
People from your mother church.
And they never come back, right?
Yep.
People from the mother church are there. So we went from 220 to about 160, 170 for our second, and we slowly crept up 170, 180, 190, 200, and then for a grand opening, we launched at 353. I know the exact number. We launched at 353. The week after our grand opening, we had about 200. So that's exactly where we wanted to be.
Yeah, and here's the thing we call it working the W. And there's nothing special about the letter W other than the way it plays out for this methodology. So you got your preview. So we're going to call this preview 1, and here's preview 2. And you're going to work this so that Mark's leading up. When he did his, when we did ours, we're leading up to this first preview. We're trying to gather as many people as we can through all different means. Now, a lot of people we've used very effectively. Ron still uses. Jim used it. A lot of people have used direct mail. Some people will tell me, well, direct mail doesn't work. Well, it does, we found most of the time, if you do it right. Now, if you don't do it right, there's a certain methodology how to do it. You know, if you say, we're the greatest church at this, we're that, that's not going to work. They don't care about that. They care about the felt need and what you're preaching on, and that becomes the focus. So we did direct mail. I encourage a holistic kind of marketing approach to getting the word out. So that it's going to involve now with the whole social media, Facebook, Twitter, other means. It's going to involve probably some kind of direct mail. It may involve billboards. It may involve radio, newspaper, pay-per-click on Google, all of these different ways. But you're going to try and get the word out because you're trying to ramp up to this because that first preview is the most important in my mind, in Mark's mind, than any of the others. That first preview, it's kind of like that proverbial rat or mouse going through the snake. It starts there. That provides the momentum which helps feed the other previews. So that's the starting point, is the first preview. And people ask me, how many previews should we do? And I encourage them to do somewhere between 3 to 6. If you're only going to do, 1 and then the service, is it better than just starting? Well, maybe, but you're not getting much of a momentum factor going there. When you're doing 3 or 4, and usually there is a correspondence between the more previews and the larger the launch, most of the time. And so, Mark, you did 5, right?
5.
We did 4 previews in my last church service, or my last church I started. So that's what we have is that whole preview methodology going on. And here's another reason for the timeline. You want to establish a timeline and set the time when you're going to launch, and everything works backward from that. And see, there's this sense of urgency that you need to create. It's really important to create urgency. It's not get on the field and then launch a year or 2 years from now. There's no urgency. But when you're putting together a conference talk to Jan, and Ron says, hey, I want to do this thing in 8 weeks, there's a lot of urgency. You're really focused at that point. So you're wanting to create urgency for yourself in doing that.